So TokenTEQ is helping to build the future of tokenization. And with that future comes regulation and global adoption. We're currently looking for strategic partners and capital investors to help move TokenTEQ to market.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of XDC MENA Podcast, where we talk about blockchain, projects, innovation, technology, and of course, XDC Network. I am Rebecca Dawson, XDC Network's lead of ecosystem development and also your host. And if this is your first time hearing about XDC Network is a layer 1 EVM compatible blockchain. We've been live, secure, and stable since 2019. It's also a hybrid network where we combine the strengths of both public and private networks. And yes, joining with me today is none other than Matthew. He is the founder of TokenTEQ. TokenTEQ redefines identity, ownership, and certification through tokenization. So let's get started. Matthew, welcome to the podcast.
It's great to be here.
Likewise. So Matthew, let's get started. First question, tell us your Web3 journey.
Sure. So I've been an entrepreneur for my whole life, and I've worked in many different industries, and I think that's given me a really unique perspective on tokenization and how it can be used to solve real world problems. And my last business was a small farm, and like Web3, there's always something new to learn and a new problem to solve. And that's really why I loved it. Unfortunately, after the pandemic, I would end up losing all my customers, and I ended up getting into web development. And a few years later, I ended up selling the farm and invested much of that profit into crypto. Fast forward a few months later, we had the FTX collapse, and I once again found myself reevaluating my life and everything. And I decided that I didn't just want to invest in cryptocurrencies, I wanted to invest in the utility behind them. And so my first project was an NFT project, creating NFT tokens for event tickets. And that was on the Ethereum network. And when I started to develop the idea of TokenTEQ, I realized that Ethereum was going to be too slow and it's going to be too expensive to build on. And that's when I found XDC. Here you have, the low fees, high speed, but you still have the scalability of Ethereum.
That's such a powerful pivot, from farming to Web3. Clearly, you are, faced with the real driven utilities in the real world. And yes, as an FTX survivor, I know it's an eye-opener, not just to you, but to many. And I know that's part of why you try to search more utility into Web3 space. So yeah, at what moment did blockchain really click for you that it's not just an investment, but also, a technology that you can build to? And also why XDC Network?
Yeah, so, I think the more I started to understand the utility behind it, and the more I learned about tokenizing real world assets and trade finance, the more I could see the potential it had to really transform the financial system. And I think that's really what drew me to XDC, because XDC is sort of purpose built from the beginning for real world integration. And other than that, I think that it was really the focus of XDC. They're not all about hype. They're just about, building the best network they can and building the ecosystem.
Right. Yes, creating hype in crypto is very easy. It's almost everywhere. And glad that you see XDC Network is more than hype, but bringing real utility. And I'm curious to know what's the inspiration behind TokenTEQ. Can you tell us more about that?
Oh, sure. Yeah, the inspiration really comes from growing up. I grew up in a single parent family, and my mom, she had a small cleaning business, and I remember, she couldn't get like a bank loan to be able to hire um, people to help her, so she just was always working really hard. And sometimes she would take us to these $1 million houses, and I just remember sitting there like, how can people on vacation all the time be able to afford to live here? And so when I started developing the idea behind TokenTEQ, it was really about equity, and I spent a lot of time thinking about that word because a lot of people don't have opportunity like others do, and I wanted to create something that provided that. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about the word equity, and then I was like, tokenized equity, opportunity for everyone. And that's what tech stands for. And that's really what we're building here.
I love the part where you say it's for everyone. So that is blockchain really. It opens doors not just to the unbanked people or underserved businesses, but for everyone exactly. So let's talk about your process that you made because normally what builders do or what project founders do is they create the product first and then they patent it. But for you, you done completely the opposite. You patented the process first and then built the project or the product. What led you to that decision?
Yeah, sure. So, as I really started developing the idea to use Web3 domains for tokenizing assets, I realized that what I was doing was different from what everyone else was doing. Most projects go straight into tokenizing the asset. Um, and I, I believe that you have to have like a stable anchor point, someplace where you can store metadata and where asset tokens can then reference that metadata. Um, because I think when you go straight into tokenizing the asset, you really create vulnerabilities in the process and inconsistencies because, you know, asset tokens are always going to be upgraded in the future. Um, but an XRC 721 token um, can stay the same. And I think from a regulatory standpoint, I think that's really important because for regulation, you have to have consistency. And without consistency, enforcing compliance becomes really impossible.
So it's clear for me that you want to make your infrastructure or your system to be stable and also scalable, right? So I think that is one way to make tokenization really work and also it stays trustworthy, your platform. Now let's talk about TokenTEQ because it merges identity, certification, and ownership. But how do you unify this process using smart contracts and domains?
Yes, so we have three core domains, ID, KYC, and CERT.XDC. And they all work together, but each one has their own purpose. So the ID domain actually stores the identity of the asset. KYC verifies the ownership, and CERT authenticates the documents used in the transaction. And so all of these work together and they create subdomain identifiers. They can then be embedded into the smart contract to help manage the tokenized assets.
So it's great to see seeing these three pieces combined together, creating a full system for tokenization. And how do you think this system or model be used to governments or enterprises?
Yeah, so let's take the certification model. So the certification model will be used to store, manage, and secure documents. And you know, governments, institutions, and enterprises, they spend billions of dollars every year on cybersecurity to keep their data and documents safe. And so with Web3, you have blockchain security and immutability built in. Let me give you an example. Let's take a security token. So a security token can reference a CERT subdomain identifier and it can allow access to a document. And without that token, you can't access the document, right? So if that token gets moved from the wallet, the system can immediately detect that and can invalidate that token. Unlike a password where you don't know if it's been compromised until it's been used.
So clearly, this approach brings security, especially to sensitive data, right? So let's see TokenTEQ into action. Let's play the video demonstration.
Hello everyone and welcome to TokenTEQ. In today's example, we will be demonstrating how to tokenize real-world asset real estate. We will begin by selecting the issuer, and here it will be Remax. We will then select the country code, real-world asset, REA for real estate, RES for residential, and then multi for multifamily. We'll then generate the subdomain. You can see here the subdomain is generated below. And because we will be using a smart contract, we have an alternate address selected here that will send the subdomain along with any tokens that are minted to the smart contract address. We will then give it a name. We'll call it Remax. And for the symbol, we'll be using the same subdomain to create unification across the space. Here we have the address. And for tokens, we'll be minting 1,000 tokens. We will then preview the token information. You can see that displayed here. Now I've gone ahead and pre-populated the metadata. We will then preview the metadata. That will be displayed here, along with the information from above, including the subdomain, along with the token information. At this point, we would go ahead and hit tokenize and mint. The subdomain identifier, along with the tokens, would then be sent to the smart contract address. And this concludes our demonstration for today.
So lovely video demonstration, Matthew. And yes, looking ahead, what's the roadmap for TokenTEQ?
Yeah, so ahead we're developing the AutoTEQ system for tokenization. And then we have the tech token, and that will have an upgradable smart contract along with modular features built in. And this will facilitate information and support dynamic asset valuations. And then after that, we'll be integrating AI into the AutoTEQ system. And so this will help to manage the smart contracts and also to manage the hybrid subdomain infrastructure.
That's a cool updates. Looking forward to it and making TokenTEQ, better and smarter using AI. So yes, Matthew, before we end the podcast, any final message to our viewers?
So TokenTEQ is helping to build the future of tokenization. And with that feature comes regulation and global adoption. We're currently looking for strategic partners and capital investors to help move TokenTEQ to market. If you're interested, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. And for more information, you can go to TokenTEQ.net. That's TokenTEQ.net.
All right, great to hear that you're actively looking for partners in order to take TokenTEQ into the next level. So if you're investors out there, don't worry, we will be placing all the relevant links of TokenTEQ. And yes, before doing any financial investment, please do your own research. So Matthew, thank you so much for being part of the podcast and sharing your invaluable insights about TokenTEQ.
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And for our viewers out there, if you want to know more about XDC Network, please go to zinfin.org Or if you have any question, please post it to our forum called XDC.dev. So keep learning, keep exploring until our next episode.